Hello, everybody. This is William Del Pilar. I am your conservative Latino for some conservative talk on a Friday evening. And we got a great show for you tonight again. For those tuning in, you newcomers who are going to be scrambling on here shortly, I welcome you. And on tonight's docket, we have a great guest. He's a writer and author, Dennis Brennan. He's going to tell us a little bit about his book, DC Strikes Back, speaking more of Trump striking back and doing some comparisons with Trump and Aaron Burr, and I'll have him talk to us about that. But tonight's topics, Letitia James, indicted for federal fraud. The difference between her and Trump, they got the legit evidence against her. She faces federal charges, obviously tied to a mortgage probe, as most of you guys know. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I'll remind you of the specific charges, and we'll get Dennis's take on that as well. And then we're going to talk about a local or a state race for attorney general that just blew up and became national news. And that is the Democrats and their silence on J. Jones' violent rhetoric. You're getting some Democrats coming out and stating, oh, I condemn that. I condemn that. But not the major players. And they won't drop their endorsement of him. Can you believe that? Imagine that. So they stay silent on that. We're going to get into that because why? Well, actually, my main point into why I want to get into that is he wished death on people. And we're dealing with violence for the last decade, pretty much 80% from Democrats. Then we're going to talk about the Supreme Court, how they're hearing a case regarding Colorado. It's phrased, it's being brought up under free speech, but in essence, it boils down to the law states if a boy or says he's a girl, they can't talk to him to find out what about it, because they don't want to stop that transition. The Supreme Court is hearing that case. We're going to talk about that. Then Dominion was acquired by Liberty Vote. Dominion is a bit of an oxymoron. We all know them. We all believe in our hearts they were somehow involved in the 2020 election. There's a great book we're going to talk about as well that I just purchased. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I just purchased it today. But we saw a Finnish tech on the Patrick Bet-David show in 15 minutes hack into one of these so-called machines. So the fact that they were sold is good, but I kind of found it kind of odd because they were winning a lot of these suits against them. And the key issue about these suits is simple. It's from a perspective of they're winning the suits, but in my heart, I'm like, man, it's a lot of bad activist judges out there ruling on these things, or juries that don't look at Trump and the conservatives favorably. Mike Lindell did get some kind of victories, but my whole point is they were riding high. So why did they sell? We'll talk a little bit about that. And then obviously what's the big news, Israel and Hamas, and the not so good news that we're going to send U.S. troops, not to be directly in Gaza, but to be a stone's throw away in Israel. I don't like that. And then with time permitting, we'll get into some hot takes. Before we get going, do not forget to share and give this video a thumbs up as you listen to it, as well as head on over to grumblingsmedia.com, bookmark that. You can find all of our work over there, other podcasts, and you can sit there and follow us on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, y Pandora under the handle Grumblings Media. And with that, I want to bring on my guest. His name is Dennis Brennan. And Dennis, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, William, for having me.
Well, it's good to have you on. I always like doing the show with a guest. It's more fun. You get different takes. Sometimes we disagree. Sometimes we don't. Tell us a little bit about your book. I see the partial title there, DC Swamp Strikes Back.
Right. It's the full title is DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. And it's been out May, I think it came out. I've been making the tours on a lot of podcasts. It's a book comparing the struggles that Aaron Burr had back in his time, right after he was vice president for Thomas Jefferson. And of course, the battles Donald Trump has had since 2015, really, up until being elected the second time. And it's an interesting take on how things haven't really changed.
And where can they get that book?
Well, my own website, authordennisbrennan.com, but it's also available where all fine books are sold. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and 50 other locations. If you go on their website, you'll find it.
Outstanding. Well, let's get right into this, sir. The first topic on hand is Letitia James, a federal grand jury in Virginia's Eastern District, and that's important because that's her home turf, indicted her on fraud-related charges tied to the mortgage investigation, thus intensifying scrutiny on officials who tried to take out President Trump. Last week it was James Comey. This week it is Letitia James, and both of them have gone out on video. I'm innocent. It's political persecution. And I don't think that works, Dennis. Before we get into the heart and the meat of this, I think the public's going, really? Y'all talking political persecution? Your quick thoughts on the fact they're talking political persecution.
Yeah, I'm surprised both that they're going public, because every criminal defense attorney is probably yelling at the screen saying, be quiet, you are indicted, you're not supposed to be talking. And then secondly, it's the height of hypocrisy when you've got these two who went after Trump and after pretty much any ally with Trump that they could. And I think the phrase they used is nobody's above the law.
Yes.
Well, that includes them. So we'll see.
We shall see. So let's get specific on here. She was indicted this past Thursday, just yesterday. We knew it was coming. She knew it was coming. And I don't care what anybody says. She's cringing a little bit. Why? Because they have actual evidence on her. The charges include one count of bank fraud. And that's pretty much consistent. That's what everybody's reporting. But there's also one count of making false statements to a financial institution. I could only find that on CBS and DOJ websites. But regardless, if she's convicted, Dennis, she faces penalties, including up to 30 years in prison per count and the $1 million fine per count. Now, Democrats they could not get off their knees fast enough when these type of charges were being brought up on Trump. And now it's political persecution. Now, what does this stem from? It stems from a 2020 purchase of a home in Norfolk, Virginia. I was stationed there in the military. Beautiful place. Overcrowded, though. You don't want to be there rush hour traffic, though. But she bought a home there for $137,000 with a $109,000 mortgage. She allegedly misrepresented it as a second home to secure a lower interest rate, but rented it out as an investment property. And that's misrepresentation. And that resulted in her saving about $20,000 over the loan's life. So Bill Pulte, he is a Federal Housing Finance Agency director. He's the one who got this all going with a letter to the DOJ. And the letter detailed several allegations: co-signing a mortgage with her niece for their Norfolk home while being required to live in New York for her position. She listed that Norfolk property as her principal residence, which that means that's where she's going to be living at. And then she also bought a 5-family Brooklyn property with a loan limited to 4 units or fewer, and she misrepresented that to secure better loan terms. And there's also a 1983 incident where she and her father signed documents stating they were husband and wife. What is it with these Democrats? Ilhan and her brother, Letitia and her father. We are not an incestuous country. I mean, they talk about us hillbillies being like that. And look at them. Dennis, your thoughts on these charges?
It's interesting because I read the indictment. And, we've been hearing about this now for a little while. And if, the problem that Letitia James has is they have documents. You've signed the documents. So without seeing the document and assuming the indictment is truthful, she has a real problem. I mean, if it says that you were buying it for your secondary residence and there is a difference between that and renting out property, holding it as a rental property, and she knows there's a difference, she's got a problem. And just by signing that document, it's one of the easiest ways for the feds to convict people. They have the document right in front of you. And often those cases are slam dunks, so to speak.
Now, give me your thoughts on this. On CNN the other day, on today, I want to say it was today or yesterday, I can't remember. I watched so much to prep for this, but they were like, everybody does this. What's the problem? I'm like, really? To me, and when I hear that talk, they know they've lost the battle. Now it becomes a narrative war. It's like, well, everybody does this. They want their side to start going when somebody brings it up. What's a big deal? Everybody does it. What's a big deal? Everybody does it. Your thoughts. What's your take on that? When you hear that, what's your take that the left is thinking, that her defenders, their strategy?
Yeah, that does sound like you've given up, that you're going to lose. I would correct CNN because everybody doesn't have multiple homes or properties. That's really for people that have money. So if you're out there working and you're watching CNN, you're probably taking offense to that. You didn't sign a mortgage document, and that lies. I mean, I think most people probably sign these documents not knowing. She's got a tougher problem being an attorney.
Yes. That's a good point, Dennis. That's a very good point, because I remember I bought my house, and people, I'm not lying. It's like you get paperwork like this, and you put your trust fully in that realtor, because this is the process for like half an hour. And like, Doc, I want to say 200. I have no clue, but it's a lot of documents. All they do is whoosh, here, initial here. So I guess, but doesn't that? I'm sorry, Dennis. Are you a lawyer?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's the impression I got. So, isn't there a saying? There's no ignorance. There's a saying that I grew up with. I used to hear on TV. There's like no ignorance of the law.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
There you go. So, but the fact that she's a lawyer, on top of that, you're saying she doesn't have a lot of wiggle room.
No, and I think that's going to be a problem for her with the jury, because even if you're the dumbest attorney in the room, they're going to hold you to a higher standard than themselves.
Right.
And they're going to say you should have known, even if she pleads she doesn't know. I would assume, if she can't get this dismissed out for some technical reason and it goes to trial, I would assume she's going to have to testify to explain what she was signing, that she didn't know. She's going to have to really cop out and say, I'm not as smart as I've been telling voters.
Right, exactly. So you're a lawyer. Talk to us about. I think her name is Halligan. What is her name? Her name.
Yeah,
Lindsay Halligan. She is. I think she was Trump's personal lawyer at one point, but she was put in for the Comey case, I believe, because time was running out. Now, when somebody sits there and says, "Well, she's a Trump appointee," she's in for Trump. The Eastern District is heavily Democrat. In fact, the guy who resigned, who they pretty much fired, he was up for nomination. He had ties to Comey. He was at best at the closest you can claim him to be conservative is he's a rhino. So he wasn't really an ally. He was more center left than he was center right in my eyes. And my point, people, is that whole Eastern District leans center left to uber left. So I think Trump had no choice but to put in his person, or that none of this would have happened. And the difference here, they had the legit goods, allegedly. Your thoughts on that whole political process there and how it's being portrayed?
It's always funny when you have people complaining that the president appointed someone. That's the process. Every president is entitled to appoint his people as U.S. attorneys. It's done. Those people are all political.
That's
Nobody becomes U.S. attorney in this country without having some political ties. Now, it might not be directly to the president. It might be a senator or a congressman, but you're not, walking in there as Joe Nobody. They know who you are. The legal community knows who you are, and the political community knows who you are.
Exactly.
And this is no different. And I'm going to say that he's, by putting her in, I mean, he wanted people that he trusts. I don't see anything wrong with that.
No. And for the audience, let us remind you what Letitia James did. And this was thrown out. He had a Manhattan judge. They were all in the bag to get Trump. This was political persecution, I think, that we have not seen in our lifetime. I mean, maybe it happened back in the day before technology with our founding fathers in the first 100 years, because corruption was really rampant there in terms of the elites and the poor. But in my lifetime, have you seen a political persecution of a former or sitting president? In fact, the closest I would say would be Nixon and Watergate, because when you actually research Watergate, that wasn't exactly how the media has portrayed it. But I don't think I've ever seen that. And the reason I bring this up is the James put a 2022 civil lawsuit against Trump and the Trump organization, and they ordered a penalty exceeding $350 million, and it ballooned up because they purposely jacked up the interest, so it was accumulating. And so it was over $500 million with interest before it was overturned on appeal. Now that's still ongoing because of the way the appeal process worked, and the judges decided to do it. But they, in essence, threw it out, and I fully expect Trump to get exonerated as the rest of that case goes up. But they're trying to sit there and say they're trying to use his posts on True Social against him, where he's like, Pam Bondi should investigate James Comey, and Adam Schiff, he's guilty as hell. I find it refreshing. I told somebody just the other day, I go, he's out in the open. He's saying, y'all try to politically persecute me. Y'all are guilty, and you're guilty of this, I found out. So I want to see you guys persecuted yourself. Whereas Democrats just hide behind lie after lie. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. You're looking at, when you ask, is there anybody else persecuted like that? I couldn't find anyone when I was researching the book. Aaron Burr, we had to go all the way back to Aaron Burr to find anybody persecuted like Trump. And it is interesting that you have Letitia James, who ran on the idea of getting Trump for something. And
exactly. Tell the audience, she campaigned on that, didn't she?
And she never listed exactly what he had done, because I don't think he really did anything. And she didn't know what he did, but she vowed that she would get him. And she did, at least in a sense. She had him in court. She did get the judgment originally. And remember, she was dancing around talking about putting a padlock on Mar-a-Lago and other properties. It's like, he gets to appeal. What are you doing?
Was that the case where they judged Mar-a-Lago as only worth $18 million?
Yes.
And what's it worth? Like, I forget, but it's astronomically high. It's I can't remember, but like it's not even close to how much they were claiming. And so to me, the fix was in. And let me, as a lawyer, I'm a God-fearing person. I don't go to church. I don't believe in the church. I believe in God and honoring and taking care of people. But I truly believe in my heart, people like Letitia James and those guys, when they meet their maker, it's gonna be like, damn, it's kind of warm in here, I guess what am I trying to ask is I'm not quite sure how to put my point there. So let's move on actually on that before we get deep into the woods on that. But it's just frustrating to see the political persecution of somebody because they're considered an outsider. And I come from Panama. I've seen two dictators. I was a protected American citizen, but I've seen two dictators. And Dennis, you did the thing on Aaron Burr, the whole Revolutionary War. I truly believe our country may not be close to a tipping point. We tend to always come back from this nonsense, but I believe we're at a tipping point we've never seen since the early days of the founding of the country in terms of the corruption, the size of the government. It's a behemoth that moves and has gained its own life. And Trump can't get the job done. He's starting to, but I don't know if we have enough people down the road after maybe Vance or Rubio to get the job done. What's your thoughts on that, having researched your book and the revolution? I'm sure you came across Revolutionary War type stuff that talked about that.
I think the country, we do have those tipping points, right? Where people start, we hear a lot of that, there's going to be a civil war. I don't think so, but I understand how people get to that point. And it probably was similar,
right?
In the 60s when you had all the revolutionaries and, people in the street, same thing we have now. And I think if you go back further, obviously the Civil War split the country, largest amount of casualties for the U.S. servicemen. So we've had those problems. We always are able to build up and get back in there. And I think, now Trump is trying to to steer the boat in the right direction. Unfortunately, his opponents are not giving up either, and it's building, I think, what he's called the bench, the people who I guess would be J.D. Vance and Rubio and so forth.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think the swamp is being cleaned out? Because it seems like we have a new this is Trump's party, people. People like to talk about Christian nationalism. That's all fine and dandy. But let me tell you something, as a Puerto Rican Panamanian who in Panama, again, I saw two dictators. I was there for just cause. In fact, I was interrogated by my own intel officer because I was part Panamanian on a spook ship. Nothing. It was just a freaking officer wanting to get his jollies off, thinking he could look good in front of the bosses. But my point is I've probably been closer to all this nonsense than most of y'all ever have or ever will be. And I see this behemoth, but I also see this new generation coming in. And I think it's finally dawning on me and many people that this is Trump's party. These are his acolytes starting to move up. And that is good because they're fighters. Rubio is spectacular. So is Kash Patel, because what used to happen, Dennis, the person, the administration representative, cabinet member, whatnot, will go up there and they get chewed out for an hour and a half. And the Democrats or Republicans, vice versa, will get their sound bites. That's not the case anymore with Trump's acolytes. I mean, Patel is just flat out, Shiv, you're just a pathetic excuse for a human being. I mean, I know your wife's stepping out on you because you're that bad of a man. I mean, obviously, I'm being sarcastic here, but that's what I kind of see. And I like it because we've got to get this government smaller.
I think you see it in this term with Trump, that he's really rebuilt the party in his own image. And you see when it's J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, people, Hegseth, when they go on and speak on not only before Congress, but you see it with the media and how the media treated the administration the first time. And sometimes I think the mistake by those Republican administration officials was you let them frame the question. Well, JD doesn't do that. Rubio doesn't do that.
Exactly.
And DeSantis never did that either. They would always say, wait a minute. One of the best clips, I think, is J.D. Vance with Margaret Brennan, who is no relation. But, I know it wasn't Margaret Brennan. It was, I forget the other, but it was a reporter saying to him about the gang members in Arizona. And they were in the building. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, it's just one building. He said,
oh, yeah. I think it was the one. She has a son. I think it was on Face the Nation. Or
it was a Sunday show, yes. And he said, do you hear yourself? Oh, it's Martha on ABC. Do you hear yourself, Martha? Because that's he changed the whole discussion. If there's even one criminal in that building and people can't be safe in it, that's a problem. And he went on about that.
Exactly. In fact,
they've been very good about that. I don't know if they've been newly trained because they're really outstanding there. And then you see, as you mentioned in Congress, when they go to these hearings, they don't take any guff.
I think it's leadership. That's clearly leadership. They're mimicking their boss. They see their boss wants fighters, so they're not holding back. And what you said is a great point. It's only one. She said it's only a few apartment buildings. And that's right. He goes, do you hear yourself? Yeah. Do you hear yourself? And that's what on CNN. Well, everybody does it. And I don't think they understand they view blacks and Latinos. They're not your people, Trump. That mugshot, they were Trump's people at that moment in time. So Trump can relate to every culture. Now he's got to grow the base. And I think he's doing that. All right, let's close this segment out. So, my take is this indictment of Letitia James isn't just another headline. It's a wake-up call, people. For years, she weaponized the justice system to target conservatives. She chased President Trump with baseless fraud claims while committing the very acts she accused him of, allegedly. That's not irony. It's accountability. And it's sparking a bigger fight over fairness, integrity, and who the law really protects. If you bend the rules to serve your politics to try to destroy someone with drummed up evidence, don't cry foul like the Democrats are right now when they snap back with actual evidence. And that's Trump snapping back. If you twist the law, you will pay the price down the road. And it's time we stop the double standards and demanded equal justice for awe. All right, Dennis, let's move on here. Democrats are facing backlash over Jones's violent message. So this is, when I do my research, there's a lot of stuff there. But what this boils down to is a man who has dark fantasy thoughts of murder, of violent acts. So the Virginia Democrats, this is in Virginia. This was not a national story. A typical attorney general race. Democrat was leading, likely to win. Young, decent-looking black man that was Democrats' wet dream, facing I don't know if he's Latino, but your Anglo-Republican. He was leading, I want to say, by 10 plus points. And I'm not saying this in any way except them the facts. You know, their strategy was working as it usually does in these type of races. But they're facing fallout. His messages fantasized about violent acts against Republican opponents, this including shooting the then House Speaker Todd Gilbert. So this scandal actually threatens not it's not fracturing the Democratic Party at this moment, but it's fracturing their connection with the everyday American voter. Now, there's a big governor's race here, and that's the Democrats' Abigail Spanberger. She's not as far left as she's starting to become. You know, something happens. It's like the TDS virus, Dennis. They just become more out there. But a few years ago, she wasn't as far out there as she's starting to become. But her and Tim Kaine, they've condemned the remarks, but they haven't removed their endorsements of him. And there's private concerns among strategists. This is going to create fallout, and it's going to create fallout that could possibly affect the down ballot ticket. That's my take as a voter, you know, because people are getting sick of the Democrat Party. There's new allegations. Well, they're not new anymore. At the time I was writing this up, they were. But on police violence, he wanted, you know, you kill a few of them and things will change, you know. So there's some serious issues with this young man. Your thoughts overall before we get into some of the meat?
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on, you know, when you say, I think it was a text, so I'm going to say or chat, but I think the quote was three people, 2 bullets, Hitler, Gilbert, and Pol Pot. Gilbert takes 2 to the head. And then he goes on to talk about killing his family too. It goes beyond normal. You know, that's not private chats as it's being depicted. That's a guy that shouldn't be anywhere near holding any political office of any sort. And the fact that Spanberger and Kaine won't come out and say, we aren't endorsing you anymore, we're pulling it, is ridiculous. You look in Illinois years ago, there was a group called the LaRouche Group, and they took over the Democratic Party. They won the governor spot and Secretary of State, and I think one more spot. Well, what the Democrats did then, and this is many years ago, I want to say, it probably was like in the 80s. What the Democrats did is they formed their own party. They split off,
right?
And they said, we're not endorsing them. Don't vote for them. And they ended up losing the governor's race in that race because they did the right thing. But that was a different Democrat Party than you see now. That was a party
more blue collar, blue dog.
Right. And they were sitting there. They knew you didn't want to be associated with a guy like that, and you don't want to be associated here long term. You might lose a race. Like, okay, the attorney general race, you'll lose because they can't replace him, even if he drops out right now. And he will lose if they all pull their endorsements. He might lose anyhow. I saw where he's 21 points today in a poll. He dropped. Now, I don't know if that poll's any good, but.
Oh, right. In fact, I have them. I have so many notes on this, but he's okay. So so some post-scandal polling, Hart Research, October 4th through 6th, Miyares 46 to 45%. He leads Miyares 46 to 45%. That's 1 point. 44. That's just one I think you're talking about. 44% of voters were less favorable towards Jones due to text. But you're right. Here we go. Here it is. Jones' unfavorability rose from 19% in September to 43% post-scandal. So, Dennis, so we know he's a vile person. He's not a good human being. The guy has problems. He had dark fantasies about the kids, calling them little fascists. People, this is bigotry towards somebody just because those kids' parents are Republican. I have a belief you don't put the sins of the father on the son, but you don't put it's you are your own person. So this is not a good human being. And the reason I brought this topic up is Charlie Kirk was just murdered, taken out by a Democrat. Radicalized, I'm sorry, not radicalized Democrat, a radicalized leftist is what I'm going to say. Why? The guy he was radicalized per his parents. Trump, 2 assassination attempts. You go back to, I had a couple of shows ago, Dennis, I had like a list of like 20 some odd violent acts, Republicans have done towards conservatives. And this is a chance for the Democrats to begin righting the ship and going, I condemn that. I do not endorse. I pull my endorsement. He needs to drop out if they want to bring America together, but they're not. And when I talk about the radicalization of America, when I talk about Democrats are okay with the violence, why? Biden knew what could happen by not giving Kavanaugh security. He knew what could happen by not giving RFK Jr. security. And now they won't condemn and ask this guy to drop out. To me, they're okay with this. And I don't want you to agree with me because I'm on the show. Because what I'm saying, some people are going to go, wow, William, that's pretty deep in what you really think of them. And it's not all Democrats, but I think it's leadership. I think it's the AOCs, the Schumers, the Pelosi's, the Bidens, the Obamas. They're okay with this. What are your thoughts on that? Am I barking up a wrong tree? I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I wish I'm wrong. But what I've seen since Trump came down that escalator, that's what I've seen progress from that part.
I'm not sure what Biden knew because, based on what we watched the last 4 years, but I think his administration, when we talk about Biden, I think sometimes it's really the people around him. And each administration seems to get a little bit more to the left with the Democrats. I think that's the reason you see these like Kane and Spanberger not coming out and condemning it, because a big portion of the party anymore is far left, and they're afraid of making those people.
Oh, Dennis, real quick. This is what since you mentioned Tim Kaine, he dismissed the messages as indefensible, but he says that's out of character for Jay Jones. Then he goes, "I've known Jay Jones for 25 years." Oh, this is a quote. "I've known Jay Jones for 25 years. I'm still supporting Jay Jones," unquote. So you see my point? I just wanted the audience to hear. That's what United States Senator Tim Kaine.
Well, next he's part of the problem. He's part of the problem of why Trump was able to take over the Republican Party, but also gained so much momentum because people were looking for something different. Kaine, that's the old way. Right? You try to pretend that you're against what he said. Like, I condemn it, but there shouldn't be a but. I mean, what's left out of this whole thing is, yes, he wants to apparently put 2 bullets in the head of the speaker, and he wants to kill the children. He's also, and let's face it, if you have a gun and you have 3 bullets, I gotta think you want Hitler and Pol Pot. I mean, what, you had a chance to kill Hitler?
And for y'all who don't know who Pol Pot is, he was a Cambodian dictator. Thousands and thousands and thousands and I want to say tens of thousands, if I remember my history. Not very good, as Trump would say, not a very good guy. But real quick, Dennis, here's some of the other Sheldon Whitehouse. I haven't given it a thought. Adam Schiff declined to comment. Mark Warner ignored the question on returning donation. Mark Kelly, the disgusting excuse of a senator out of Arizona who has disrespected his service in the Air Force as a former NASA because he spewed so many non-truths. Political violence is a real thing, but then cut off. Stop. So John Ossoff, he refused to answer. It's there, Dennis. It's there. I think
they're afraid.
In terms of
it's the left, they're afraid of the left in the party, and the left is bringing them down because if you have to stand up to it. But more importantly, I think they're afraid because they lose donations. They all get a lot of donations, small, but it's Letitia James is out getting money now based on her indictment. And they send these emails out
Uh,
and texts, and the left is a big part of their fundraising machine. So,
okay, this is a product of their own doing. Eventually, in the movies, when the dumb idiot moron, the I want to save the world, goes and helps the antagonist of the movie, it's like towards the middle, between the middle and the end, right, with a quarter of with 10% of the movie left, the antagonist kind of takes them out, murders them, and they got this look. Why'd you do that? Because they're bad people. And my point in saying this is like the scorpion and the frog. That's a better analogy. The scorpion stabs a frog or stings a frog in the middle of the river as they're crossing because he convinced the frog, hey, take me across the river. The frog's like, why? You're going to stab me. No, I won't. And he stabs him. And then as they're drowning, the frog goes, why'd you do it, man? Why'd you do it? It's in my nature. So when they bring all these far left, these socialists, these communist leaning over the last 2 generations, they've been indoctrinated. They've kind of reaped what they've sowed. And most of America, thank goodness, is still not quite on board. So this is a great opportunity, I think, for the Republican Party. Do you think they can take advantage of that? And feel free if you disagree with me with my thought process on what's happened to the Democrat Party.
no, I think that is, they wanted the benefit, right? They've indoctrinated in the schools, all the institutions. In these schools, it's just not the universities where Charlie Kirk was working. You've got the high schools, even grade
Correct.
schools where people complain, where whether it's the, transgender issues and so forth, it's every issue. What they were doing was raising little Democrats, little leftists, really, because I don't think you recognize. I
Exactly.
mean, I grew up in a Democrat household, and it was not like that. There wasn't a hatred of America. It wasn't all the left ideology. It wasn't that America's wrong. And now that's what you find.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, they've let them take over the party to an extent. And I think there's some people in the Democrat Party that want to bring it back. They just don't know how. How do you do it when you've given up control of fundraising and activism on the street? They use these people constantly.
Oh, I think if they were smart, they would hope Trump succeeds because that would benefit the blue collar and bring the old Democrat Party up by getting rid of these outcasts. And if he can take some of Soros's groups out with the Antifa type stuff, so that would actually benefit the old style Democrat that feels lost at what their party's become. So let's close this out. Look. To you guys out there, look, the J. Jones scandal. What's it do? It lays bare the left's selective outrage over political threats. Their reactions to this situation proves that. They spent years vilifying conservatives for January 6th. Then they blamed conservatives for the horrific death of Charlie Kirk. He had it coming, was a lot of what they were saying. Yet their own AG candidate is caught fantasizing about harming Republicans and even children. And what do top Democrats like Abigail Spanberger running for Virginia governor and Tim Kaine, the sitting United States senator from Virginia, say and do? They stall, deflect, and they stay silent. They haven't removed their endorsements of him. It's hypocrisy, plain and simple. We want real accountability. And if we want real accountability, we must keep calling this out every conversation. Did you know what Jay Jones did? Huh? No, let me fill you in. Double standards like this erode public trust. And worse, they deepen division. And that's their playbook. Keep their base angry at ours. Keep us fighting one another as they consolidate power, as this behemoth called the United States government gets a life of its own and just keeps growing like this big old, like The Blob, a movie from the 50s. So Virginia voters, don't let them dodge this in November. Hold the line because only you can change the trajectory Democrats are on. All right, Dennis, let's get into this topic. The Supreme Court scrutinizes the Colorado gender counseling ban. This is great because you're a lawyer. So the Supreme Court is examining Colorado's 2019 ban on conversion therapy for minors. I got all these topics, but in a nutshell, what they're saying is that the counselors or the therapist cannot talk to the kid if he's having I'm a boy, but and you're really a girl biologically. They don't want the therapist to sit there and go deep into the talk because they don't want, they're using the excuse that you can't, they're transgender. You can't convince him. That's immoral. It's a proven fact that you can't give him. And they're saying that, Dennis, because of the homosexuality conversion. To my friends and people out there, if you're gay, I don't care. My personal belief is this: you can't change somebody who's truly gay. I believe most of us are born, let's take the car for the example. Most of us are hardtops, but some are convertibles, in terms of straight versus gay. That's how I look at it. But here's the big difference, Dennis. If you're gay and you're being convinced of it otherwise, or you're socially experimenting, you wake up one day, yeah, I'm not gay. If you're transgender and you come out and state that, you wake up at 18 and you're like, no, I'm a man. I ain't got that anymore. No, I'm a woman. Where'd my breasts go? Or you're stunted with this hormone therapy. These are non-reversible things with transgender, and the study and the science is not set in stone, and it will never be in this type of scenario. And that's kind of what this case is about. However, it's being phrased as a free speech case. And Dennis, as a lawyer, can you explain that to us?
Yeah, I think so. Basically these therapists and the one that's suing are saying it's freedom of speech, right? They can use this in their practice. But everybody that's licensed by the state, whether you're a therapist, a doctor, a dentist, an attorney, anybody that is licensed has to follow certain standards. And usually those standards come from the practice. So in this case, science is a big part of it. And gender dysphoria is really something that's new. It was considered a mental illness. Now it's been kind of massaged. And while there's no real evidence to back it up, this therapist and some just like this therapist believe that they have a right to say whatever they want in their practice. But the state has an overriding right to be able to enforce regulations of how you practice if you want to keep your license. So that's what it's coming down to. And I think the Supreme Court's going to agree with the idea that the state has a right to regulate the practice.
So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts as an American and as a lawyer from the legal standpoint, but also as and I just assumed you're a conservative, but my take is simple. Look, I get it with the gay conversion. I was never a fan of that. But I'm like, hey, a therapist has a right to dig into anything in that person's psyche. That's what they're there for. So I'm like, to me, this is fascism. You can't talk about this. We're censoring your free speech to be able to talk to this child about that topic. And they're trying to frame it as, well, this is a medical issue. And I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, it's a medical issue. I think surgery, medication, all that type of stuff. I'm like, counseling, maybe that falls under the health industry, but you're talking back and forth to help somebody get their mind straight. And I think that's a little bit different. Maybe it's medical, but it's different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think that usually would be a good argument. I think when you're talking about gender affirming care, it becomes a little bit strict. I don't know. It's a sticky little decision where you got some therapists saying, yes, you think you're, a boy, you're really a girl. And I guess a lot of this also depends on what age are you. Most of us would say once you're an adult, it doesn't matter.
That's my take. Whatever. Once you're an adult, whatever. But see, I don't disagree because you're the lawyer, you know better. But I don't view it from that angle. I view it as everything equal. There's going to be bad therapists who are going to go, yeah, you're a boy, you're not a girl anymore. Let's start getting you on the conversion. And then there's going to be the other side. If somebody's gay, you're not gay. Let's change it back. So let's toss those two out there. I'm talking about that one. I'm talking about the honest therapist who wants to sit there and go, let's talk about this. Whatever they need to go through. That's what I'm talking about with. So I don't view it as, well, transgender this, transgender that, or gay this or gay that. I view it as This is a one-on-one. This is the government. What was it with our body? That's you and your doctor. That's kind of how I view this. So I guess I do see the free speech.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think the distinction is as long as you can discuss it, you just can't have gender affirming care. So they're making a very clear distinction between sitting there saying, oh, you think you're another gender? Yes. And then encouraging them into that. Now, you can't sit there and talk to them and let them tell you why they think they are. And you just can't jump in with the solution being, yes, you're right, change your gender.
Exactly. And that's my whole point, though. The state has no business. Because if it's a bad therapist, they shouldn't be licensed and practicing. But we had bad people doing a lot of things. MP comes in with gender rejection. Gender rejection is clear. No, we are God's children. Adulthood is to grow in the number of things which are forbidden. And MP, I believe with that. I'm with you. But I also believe we have to fight for these things. But at the end of the day, I can't tell a parent what not to do unless they're totally abusing. And if you believe that's abuse, then that's a fight you can fight. But at the end of the day, on the flip side, you get the government who steps in. And I don't think anybody should step in. I believe you should raise your children as you wish. Others should raise them as they wish, as long as they're not doing harm to the child. And what I see as harmful here is the state coming in and dictating what you can or can't talk about. Dennis, your thoughts, MP, here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another one coming up too. I think the problem, it's a tough balance, right? There's always going to be, and that's what they're going to look at. Is it constitutional? Does the state have a right to regulate this? Well, it is the practice. There's a regulation in how this therapist does their profession. So they have a right to regulate. How far can they regulate? And is there...
Exactly. No, you're right. The state has a right. Here, in fact, MP once again says, Uncle Sam is duty bound to enforce the law of the promotion of health. This is why self-murder is illegal in the U.S. law, for example. I agree. And to Dennis's point, they have that responsibility. But there's a line you have to draw somewhere. And the state of Colorado is trying to allow for the claims of transgender to not be touched. And here's my issue with this. Is somebody posted on X, it was Twitter at the time, many years ago. And I don't know if it's true, but it made perfect sense because I've seen it happen with other kids indirectly related to the story. And the kid told the parents, I want to be a boy. I can't say, well, I want to be a girl. No, I want to be I want to be a girl. And it was a little kid. It was, a small child. And the parents, instead of running to their neurosurgeon, they sit there and say, hey, I got one here. I got one. They sat down and talked to the kid. He wanted to be a girl because his sister, who was a little bit older, he felt was getting more attention than he was. And Dennis, you look at some of these stats, statistically, it's just not possible for like a family to have 3 or 4 transgender kids, and they do. Look at Hollywood. Hollywood breaks the statistical reality with how many Hollywood stars and the transgender kids. And if you are, I do know a transgender person, people. I do know. And she was truly transgender. She went through it. She explained to me her hormones. She was born with both organs, one internal and the other. And she went, it was a hormonal nightmare. So there are certain things that happen. But I think right now, we're as a country, it's just gone into madness. You have boys who just claim to be girls and they're destroying girls in sports. So, Dennis, it's not that I'm against transgender. I'm like, what the hell? What happened to the line in the sand? What happened to some common sense? What happened to nurturing your kids? And Dennis, before we close this out, I want your final comment. But my final take on this before I close it out myself with my little diatribe is that the human brain does not finish developing till about 24-ish, give or a few years longer. And they're trying to sit there and tell me that this 3-year-old knows if he's transgender at that age. You have the floor, sir.
No, I think I agree with that. The problem we have is a lot of this gender affirming care is occurring with children, and where it becomes another form of indoctrination where you're telling these people, because if you're a kid, whether you're 3, whether you're 7, you don't know anything really about gender. You mean you're
Exactly.
probably playing with girls and boys at some point. Now, as you get older, that kind of separates, and you do know what's going on. But when you're a little kid, you don't know. And these teachers or
Exactly.
therapists who sit there and they're not affirming it, they're convincing them, hey, you really, your problem is you're really a girl. And if I'm a little
Exactly.
boy, what do I know? Okay, maybe I can't really throw as far as the other guy, or I can't run as fast as my brother, or I'm not that strong. I'm wrestling, I lose. Maybe I am. So that's a problem.
Yeah. Yes, yes. So the G-Man, the same group says you can't change the way someone was born, and that people are born the wrong way. I lied. I had one more take on it. My other issue is how schools are hiding this from parents. And then when some parents find out, they learned that the teacher and friends were actually convincing the kid. And so to me there's just so much wrong, because I can't remember what court case it was. It was like on 60 Minutes, featured like 10 or 12 years ago, maybe 15 or 20, when they proved how the counselors were coercing the kids into thinking and acting certain ways, and they coerced them so bad the kids were making stuff up about their parents saying certain things that the parents never said. And it wasn't a product that the kids were liars. It was a product that it's that easy to manipulate a young mind. I don't know if you remember that case, but it did make national news maybe a decade or two ago. And MP responds, I think she agrees with me. Sounds reasonable. Gentlemen, you are right. Thank you there, MP. So let's close this out there. Any final comments on this, Dennis?
No, I think you hit upon a point. I think there's been several cases where children, it turns out, in law especially, where you're not considered a good witness until a certain age. I think it's over 6 years old. They have to actually interview you because you are susceptible to being convinced of things. And there was a case with children being molested. I don't know if the same one you were talking about, where
Yes, I think
they
so.
were convinced that they were molested, and they
Yes,
actually
that's the case.
convicted a gentleman, and I believe his mother, who ran the daycare. And the problem is, it never happened. Years later, they
Mm-hmm.
were able to prove their innocence, actually. And the problem was the investigators put it in the kids' heads that any little.
Exactly. And, but it does extend to adulthood. Hillary Clinton, boy, that sniper fire. Brian Williams, that sniper fire. Tell you, yeah, yeah. And guys, we always say it. Boy, if I could go back now into the body when I was a kid, I would have known that girl in ninth grade rubbing her foot on my leg under the table. I would have known what it meant back then. But I wasn't developed in the brain enough. So, all right, people. The Supreme Court's apparent skepticism in this case, it does signal a potential accountability for Colorado's enforcement tactics, including anonymous complaints against counselors. Oh, those anonymous complaints, just like the New York Times with Trump, that never really existed. But this could lead to fallout for similar bans in other states. So what I'm trying to say is the ruling's national implications are going to reshape counseling regulations nationwide. This is spotlighting conflicts between state mandates and therapist rights, and it's going to pave the way for a broader scrutiny of gender-related policies, in my eye. This law is a textbook case of government overreach, silencing free speech, and faith-based counseling in favor of one-size-fits-all gender agenda. Kids are struggling, and instead of helping them find clarity, the state punishes therapists like Kaylee Childs. That's the individual who brought the case. And what she wanted to offer thoughtful, science-rooted guidance that challenged, what did it challenge? Political orthodoxy. And there's no ruling yet by the Supreme Court. They just heard the case, but their pushback, it looks like it's going to be a win for common sense. And it's going to be a warning shot to other states that are trying to push similar bans in order to promote gender ideology. And that's my issue. I just want fairness. Let's take care of the poor kid. Let's not push ideological preference. If we let bureaucrats dictate what can be said in private counseling, where does it end? this is reminiscent of 1984. This case isn't just about Colorado. It's about protecting families, supporting those seeking real help, restoring balance, and keeping America grounded in truth, not ideology. Dennis, what do you know about Dominion? It was just sold to U.S.-owned Liberty Vote. They were in the news every day in 2020 after the election. Your quick thoughts before we get into this.
Yeah, I mean, what you have with Dominion is a lot of people thinking something was wrong with the election. A lot of it's because, hey, you can hack into computer systems. We all know that now. We know even on our own emails, how many things do we get that could hack in? And all these computer geniuses who are between 10 years old and 50 now, because they've been studying it for so long, are, are able to get into the election system. And that's a problem. That's why you've got this push for paper ballots. Liberty, has said they're in favor of paper ballots, which is interesting.
Liberty Vote. Yes. And for the audience, they're the company that purchased them. Let me bring the audience up to speed. So what happened is Dominion Voting Systems was acquired by a Missouri-based company called Liberty Vote. And this transfers control to domestic hands, meaning it's an American company. And this follows demand after demand for transparent voting processes. Dominion became synonymous with ballot corruption, with cheating. I'm not saying they were, but that's what their name became synonymous with. And that's what happens when you say something, oh, that's a marketing trick, over and over and over, it becomes truth. I believe it, but I can't sit there and say, hey, that's true, that's what they're after. But so oversight is now being held by a former Republican elected official. And this will reshape how ballot security and verification happens. Why? Well, as Dennis said, this individual is talking about they're going to shift over to ballots. Now, they do other electronic stuff, so Dominion is not going to go away. But they say they're shifting to a paper ballot system. Your thoughts on the shift to paper ballot? Is that truly viable?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we used to have paper ballots, and the problem with the computer, not only is it you can hack into it, but there's always been this question of people in elections. I've been involved in local elections, and people would come out of the polling place or tell you later, hey, there's something wrong with the way it tabulated. You have to put a card in, and it's like I voted for your guy, but it put the vote for the other guy. Well, you have to bring that up at the time it's done. You can't come outside and tell everybody your ballot's now in with everybody else's. And it might be user error. I don't know. It's a lot easier when it's paper ballot because you mark it, you look at it, you're good. Or you punch it. But this idea, that they, paper ballots are somehow going to cause bigger fraud, I don't see that. The real chances for fraud are through the computer system. And I think it's also some people in politics would like us to get to the point where we're voting at home and we're just on the computer. And then you don't know who's voting. There's too many opportunities for fraud, and there's too many people that want to commit fraud.
Right. So for the audience, think about it this way. How many ransomware? Tens of millions. How many viruses have you got on your computer? How many times has our government system been hacked? This happens on an everyday basis, tens of millions of times around the world. Nothing is truly secure. On the Patrick Bet-David podcast, it's one of the fastest or biggest podcasts in the country. I think they just did a top 10 ranking, and they were like in the top 10. Had they put one of their other podcasts with their major podcasts, it would have been like number 2 or 3. They're that big. They brought a Finnish tech to the studio. They had one of these electronic balloting devices there. I don't know if it was a Dominion or not, so don't put words into my mouth there. But within 15 minutes, he hacked into it. Now, we've been told they're not hackable. They're not connected to the internet. I had a friend of mine say, well, William, they have to stand right next to her. I said, you don't know where they have to stand. You don't know where they have to be. I go, when you hack into something, these are smart people. They're not stupid. They're not going to be, these people know what they're doing. So they aren't secure, no matter what they tell you. And even the company that bought them no wink. They had a poll pad, which is an electronic type system that went crazy in Georgia and misrepresented Republican votes. So Dennis, my take is pencil and paper. France, who I had no love for the French. I mean, we bailed them out twice. They're arrogant. They're elitist. I mean, my God, we're still trying to know if it's two men running the country or a man and a woman. I'm being sarcastic. But my point is they do pencil and paper, and they're done in one day. Dennis, don't you find it curious? What state are you in?
Illinois.
Oh, my God. You're in a state that competes with California's bluest, ugliest, worst, most corrupt in the nation. The last 3 cycles, I've gone to bed with Republicans winning, only to wake up 4 weeks later and the Democrat squeaks. We had a Congress freshman woman go for her orientation, only to come back, find out a few weeks later she lost by a sliver. Nevada is even worse. They have like the highest rate for waking up and it's a Democrat elected. Now, statistically, that's not possible. There should be more balance with the Republicans and Democrats winning. But I'm a stats guy, people. I'm not talking nonsense here. It's not statistically sound, but they do it. They do it. That's what scares me about Prop 50 here. That's a gerrymandering where they want to redo the districts. But your thoughts, doesn't that bother you? Or am I you're a conspiracy theorist on this one, William? What's your take?
No, it bothers me too. If the public, and a big portion of the public does think, and if they think that the elections can't be trusted, we have a larger problem in the country, right? We base everything on fair elections. Supposedly, you win, you lose, whatever, and you're going to have some wins, you're going to have some losses. But you're sitting there. If you lose, and the first thought is, well, it was stolen. Well, why is that? Well, maybe it's because we're letting people vote in a lot of different ways. We're using a computer system. We're counting ballots in Illinois 14 days after the election. I'm sorry. You could have gotten the ballot in before then. I'm sorry. That doesn't,
exactly.
And that becomes a problem. We should be able to do an election. We used to make fun of other countries that would take a week. Now we're taking a week to decide who the winner in some races is, and that can't happen because it loses the whole election integrity factor.
And here's the problem, and I love this problem. I loved it when I started seeing it. So 2020, it was like 14 or 16 million more votes. So people, I'm sorry, yo soy Latino. I got black in my family, I got brown in my family, I got white in my family. We're straight to gay. Poor that you don't know what that poor is, to well off, to some are, I say, technically rich. And my point is simple, that when Obama got 14 or 16 million less votes than Biden did in 2020. You're trying to tell me that 14 to 16 million more blacks said, I like Biden better than I like Obama. No. So what happened, Dennis, this go round in 2024? I started seeing Democrats. Where did those 12 million? Where did those 14 million votes disappear? We need an investigation. Trump stole this election. And I loved it because I was like, yes, let's investigate. And we'll probably find out those votes never existed. They're called mail-in ballots that with no real name on them. And my whole point is, in my long-winded way, is trust has been broken. There's a segment of our society that no longer trusts the system. And I think that's good right now because I want to see that no trust so we can go back to paper ballots. Your thought before we close this segment?
No, I think you're right. It's easier to cheat. Like you mentioned mail-in ballots. It used to be you had to be, out of the county you were in, you had to be in the military, or you had to be disabled.
Yes.
And those are good reasons.
Yeah, or a businessman, international traveling businessman.
You're going to be gone. It can't be just because, hey, I'd like to vote by mail. I don't want to stand in line.
I'm lazy.
Because once you do that, you'll have a list. Here in Illinois, like Cook County's notorious. Chicago, they never really clean out the rolls. But if you're the precinct captain, you know who's going to vote and who's not. They're the same people all the time. So what stops you from voting for those people by mail? There's very little that stops you. And even if you say it never happens, It does. They've caught people doing it. They've caught, but every time they're caught, they'll say, well, it wouldn't have changed the election. That was a minor number. Well, we only caught those 10 people. That could be multiplied by whatever, a million, and we don't know.
And, they don't want to do that. See, that's your default. This is when I get angry with Republicans. It's like you let them change the goalposts. So it'll go from there is no fraud. And I had a discussion, a heated debate, and I'm a stats guy. That was my whole business in sports, was crunching the numbers with a Bush appointee. There's no stats. There's no fraud. And this is a Republican in elections. Statistically, there's always fraud. I know there's actual cases that have been documented, but statistically there's fraud, and on both sides. We don't know how much because studies have never been done. Then he tried to shift the goalposts. Well, it probably doesn't affect. Okay, stop. I go, you said there was no fraud. I just proved you wrong. Now you want to shift the election. No. There is fraud. So why are you trying to shift it? Well, I go, see, that's what y'all always do. Y'all people who want to sit there and crap on having honest. Let me tell you something, America. I am a citizen by birth. Puerto Ricans, we maybe have landfill problems. Tony, whatever his name was right. Puerto Rico's a landfill cesspool right now. But I was in Panama is very Americanized, so I don't consider myself an immigrant because I'm not. But I know that's been my world, and I do not know not one immigrant in my life. There's not one that I have known that has become a citizen who will stand, just like the mailmen say, in rain, sleet, snow, whatever, to cast that ballot because they're proud they get to cast an actual ballot versus the country they came from, where when they casted that ballot and they know their candidate won by 60-40 and the dictator came out and said, I won 70-30. They know it makes a difference, and we are becoming a banana republic. Final thoughts on this. Oh, real quick. There's a book that they just came out, Stolen Elections, The Takedown of Democracies Worldwide. It's a fascinating book when I read the cover and the inserts. And the reason I bought it is because Rasmussen polling, they're one of the few pollings that Democrats hate because they're actually right most of the time. He's reading. I'm like, if this guy's reading this book, I'm going to pick it up. Because Dennis, from day one, I've been covering voter fraud with actual receipts to show where it's happened, how it's happened, ranging from the founding of the fathers to how they kept blacks from voting in the 1800s. But if you can't read or write, you can't vote, laws like that. To Dennis's. Dennis comes from Illinois, which the only place that can compete with Illinois for voter corruption is New York City. I'm talking about those two cities. Chicago and New York cities have been known. It's legendary how corrupt and how their voting system was so corrupt in those days. So Dennis, I think I'm right. I'm not trying to pick on you from that, but Chicago and New York City represent bastions of legendary tales of corruption. In fact, that's where my dad's been a Republican his whole life. He's voting Democrat. What happened? He just passed away. I mean, that's where that joke came out of, Chicago. Any thoughts on I don't know if you've heard of the book, but it doesn't talk about Dominion, but it talks about the code that is in Dominion software as well that allows for cheating and why electronic ballots, we cannot have them. We think it's bad in America. Around the world where these dictators are at, they live and breathe these electronic machines. Your thoughts? And then I'm gonna
I don't like the electronic machines. I haven't liked them for a long time. I prefer the paper ballots. At some point, we moved away from that. I don't know if it was based on, hey, it's easier to commit fraud from the powers to be that, in both parties that might be able to control their areas. You speak about, we call it the uniparty here in Illinois, where when they're always agreeing on things, you have to worry because your tax bills are going up and you're not being taken care of. So you like to see a little battle between both sides. But yes, it's a problem.
Oh, yes. Yin and yang, Dennis. I'm a firm believer in yin and yang because what happens? Power corrupts absolutely. No matter how good a boss you are, if you stay in that position for 20 years, you will become corrupt because you think you're God. You all of a sudden believe you can't be questioned. So I believe in a strong, vibrant, multi-party system, but we don't have that. We are a two-tier party system. All right, people. So this Dominion handoff to Liberty Vote, it feels like progress. Finally cutting foreign ties as Dominion, I think it had a Canada ownership, and it's putting it in American hands as well as our election tech in terms of us handling it. It also lines up with Trump's push for paper ballots and real transparency, as Liberty Vote says that's what they're pushing for. Now, No Wink, the company that bought him, or subsidiary, used to be the company's name, their cloud setups and past glitches with their own printer tabulators I mentioned in Georgia, which was Republican precincts, that does raise serious red flags. So we may just be swapping out one fox for another fox guarding the hen house, because as I just said, power corrupts. Election integrity isn't about trusting your party's bosses, your party's peers, new labels, or technology. It's about consistent vigilance. And as Dennis and I keep preaching, paper ballots. You can't hack paper ballots. The computer can't glitch paper ballots. Sometimes old school is the best school when it comes to safeguarding elections. However, the paper ballots we have to worry about, mail-in ballots. That's a chain of custody nightmare fraught with no election integrity. I've talked about another topic for another day. The bottom line is, if we don't guard our votes like hawks, the left's games will keep stealing our voice. And with that, everybody, Dennis, tell us a little bit about where they can find your book.
Sure. It's called DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. It's available on my website, authordennisbrennan.com. It's also available at amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and pretty much anywhere else they sell books.
And I'll put a link to Dennis's site and Amazon.com in the description once we upload this into a podcast. And with that, my friends, I want to thank you. We had a lot more show left, but I like to keep the podcast at about an hour. We're at an hour 11. For those wondering, as a growing podcast, you want to keep it tight. You know, we'll listen to 2 hours of Megyn Kelly or Patrick Bet-David. I get it. I'm a realist. You know, William who? But that said, make sure you give this a thumbs up. Make sure you like it and share it with your friends if you're still listening or when you do watch this. And don't forget, head on over to grumblingsmedia.com. You can find more of our work, more of our podcasts over there. You can follow us on Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, y Pandora under the handle Grumblings Media. For Mr. Dennis Brennan, and thank you for coming on, and myself, William Del Pilar, this has been Fired Up. And until next week, I bid you adieu.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.